Friends, today is Tuesday, the 25th of August, and we're back in the cathedral, and I'm back in the cathedral after a week away. A little bit of vacation and a little bit of retreat. I was in eastern Montana, in the Great Plains of eastern Montana, a huge, huge space. Starting in Billings and kind of heading east. I love the vast expanse of wheat fields, and there were plenty of those, a lot of harvesting and reaping taking place, some kind of distant vistas that were completely open. You would see all the way to the horizon. Nothing would stop your view. No trees, no mountains, no nothing. And to me, it was a very, very spiritual and wonderful experience. Took some pictures, quite a few pictures actually, to try to capture some of that. But refreshed in body, mind, and spirit, here I am again as we return to the Gospel of Matthew. And let's get a reminder that the Scriptures are always speaking to us in the present, in the now, not something in the distant past, not something just to scribes and Pharisees, but to us today. And today is a good example, very short gospel, woes. It's the section of St. Matthew's Gospel in the 23rd chapter speaking to woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. And the gospel is kind of easy for us to dismiss because it speaks to us of things like tithes of mint and dill and cumin. And we think, well, what has that got to do with us? These herbs, tiny little herbs. But in fact, it has a great deal to say to us and raises important issues, questions for us in the spiritual life. It gets to, as brief as the gospel is, it gets to the very heart of biblical spirituality and biblical actions as well. And I'll start in there are only two paragraphs, two woes, and the second one, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. Hypocrites. You're trying to be someone you are not. And Jesus says, you cleanse the outside of cup and dish. In other words, what we see looks pretty good. But he says, but inside you are full of plunder and self-indulgence. Full of plunder and self-indulgence. The outside looking pretty good, but inside, maybe not so. And this morning, I was listening to the radio as I'm brushing my teeth, and there was a report on a well-known evangelical pastor, president of a evangelical university, who was accused of immorality without going into details. He was accused of immorality, and of course in the evangelical world, when these things are made public, I suppose in any denomination or business, when these things are made public, it's trouble, but especially if you are a person who preaches. And frankly, I point no fingers here. Let the one without sin cast the first stone. But this person, of course, is in great difficulty. His family is as well. The university is as well. And he's got to face these issues. And as I'm brushing my teeth, so to speak, and thinking about this, thinking about being a pastor and the lives that we live outwardly, inwardly, wondering how many times this evangelical pastor preached on immorality itself. And evangelicals preach on these things more than we do, but he probably many, many, many times preached on morality, being moral, acting morally, and now himself accused of immorality. In other words, the outside is one thing, but the inside is quite another. And thus the readings today about outside and inside, being a hypocrite, raises some fundamental questions for us as well. The most basic, obvious one, do I practice what I preach? Do I practice what I hear in the Word? Not just those speaking like myself to you, but yourself who hears the word and tries to live it each day? Do I practice what I hear and practice what I preach? Secondly, do I preach God's standards but live them? But secondly, help others to live them. Help others to live those standards. And that's one of the accusations Jesus had against the Pharisees, that they wouldn't lift a finger to help anyone. Well, do we? Do we not only know the standards of God, but help others to live them, whatever that might be? And that's, I think, that could be an interesting discussion point. How can I help others to live the gospel? And finally, the gospel today talking about the little tiny herbs of mint and dill and cumin and so on. In other words, do I emphasize the little things but forget the big ones? And what are the big ones? Peace, justice, fidelity. In our society today, a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties, including racial justice. Do I emphasize little things and forget the big things? That's a question for today. Hold that thought, and we'll see you tomorrow.